Welcome to Illustration and Media Digital Applications. This is Module 5, Unit 5.1, using plugins to add lighting and material effects. Today, we'll be adding reflective and bump value to our materials. We'll be adding lighting from Podium V2 and our Podium browser. And finally, we will be exporting photorealistic views of our drawing. I'm Sherry McKinley. Let's get started. Okay, so for today's tutorial, we're going to start by downloading the model that you see in front of you from the Get Models 3D warehouse. And I just typed in living room. And if you scroll down just a little bit, we're going to be using this one for our lesson today. So download that and bring it into your space. You'll see that it is a component, and I am going to ask you to explode that component for today so that we can easily change materials and do things like that. So we're going to right click on that component and click on then explode, and it should be all separate surfaces. Next, what I'd like you to do is we're going to have it so that when we're looking through that window there, that we're seeing a scene. And so what you can do is you can go ahead and go to your search engine and maybe go to Google Images and find a background scene that you might like. I found one that's of a lake, but if you find one of trees or a forest, something that you really love, so that when we render this, it looks even more realistic. So I'm going to draw a surface now behind my space. I'm going to push-pull it quite high. And I'm also going to push-pull it a little bit below my space. And maybe I'll actually bring it a little bit closer as well, so it's not too far. Now, when I want to paint that surface with my scene, we've done this in a previous lesson, I'm going to go to the Paint Bucket command, choose on the Add Material or Create Material, click on the Use Texture Image, Browse for Material Image File, and mine is called Lake Scene. And click Open, and it brings that scene into my paint bucket, which is amazing. Now, again, we talked about this before, but the scale factor here is usually quite small, so I'm just going to completely guess right off the bat because I know it's such a large surface here. So I'm going to change that to 30 feet prior to painting the surface, and then I'm going to go ahead and paint. Not bad, a little bit small, but that's okay, I can work with that. So you do the same, get the image so that it's quite large, or it seems to be what it would look like, you know, looking through the window. And when you have that, you can go ahead and push-pull those surfaces around the area that you want to see. Now this puts my Muskoka chair at quite a large scale, so I'm just going to crop that out by push-pulling that out. Just pull this back in a bit. And finally the left side. And we know that once that's complete, it's really easy at that point to make a component of it so that we can move it and scale it wherever we need for it to be. So I'm going to select the entire object, go to my Edit menu and choose Make Component. I'll call mine Scene. And then I'm free to scale it and move it, position it where I want for it to be. Okay, now that we have our scene there, that's great. When I look through the window, I can basically see, great, it looks like a pretty nice site where this home is. That's wonderful. Okay, what I'm going to get everyone else to do now is to change some of the materials in the model. I want you to add a little bit of wood, maybe some texture like brick, so we can kind of customize this space a little bit. And one area that I want to make you aware of is what is called the Podium browser. Now, when we installed our plugin, which is Podium V2, at the beginning of the course. It came in with these menus here, a light system to add lights, an area to change some of the settings, and it would have also come in with these shortcuts right here. Adding lights, this is just repetition, an area to render, but then there's this area called the Podium browser. Now it's really important to know what this is. We're going to click on that because this has some additional items and materials and textures that we can use for our model. I really love this. What I do is I click on show only free files because they do charge for some of these. And if you go into the textures area, then you can see actually more updated current materials that you can use in your model. And the nice thing about the Podium browser is that these materials have already been set up to have certain reflections put on them, certain kinds of bump type and bump depths put on it. It's a certain kind of mapping that's already been added to these, so you don't need to manually change it. And there's some really cool stone surfaces in here, stone wall. So I'd like you to play with the Podium browser. Now what will happen is if I wanted this material, I'm going to choose it, double click on it. And when I do double click on it, it then brings me into my paint bucket. Now I can still go through and edit it if I wanted to make it a little darker. I could change the scale of it. For now, I'm going to use it to paint this wall. And I do find that it's a little small, so I'm going to double, or just a little bit more than double, the scale. Maybe make it 36. Okay. So that's how we use that. In here, there's fabric, there's textures. It's quite fun. Have a lot of fun with that when you're changing your model. And be aware when you are adding these materials, you're adding something that has some reflective value to it, etc. There's also items that you can add. So be aware of that. Electronic items, office items, decoration that you can add to your model. So go ahead and try that. So that's our Podium browser. That really lets us add new materials that have reflective value on them. So do use that. Okay, next what we want to be aware of when we are ready to render, it's not going to change the look of the model as we work on it. It is essentially going to end up exporting out a graphic that has material and lighting effects. So those are the two areas that we need to work on. The materials themselves, how bumpy, how reflective, what type of surface will they look like. We give it a property. And then after that, we basically work with adding lights. And we know that between reflective and bump values and lights, we can create quite a realistic looking model. Now we're going to begin by going to plugins and then SU Podium V2. And the first thing we want to do is go to the options menu. Let's click there. Now in here you'll find a few things that you want to be aware of. We're going to touch on the basics. There's preset rendering outputs, and default tends to work quite fine, but it will for this image probably because I don't have a side wall on it. But if you have a completely closed in interior space, you might use one of the interior presets, and that basically determines how the lighting is going to render and look. But if you're doing an outside view of something, you would click on an exterior view, which will adjust the sun and things like that. We're going to work with default for now. We can try interior later, but let's try default for now. Now with the trial version of Podium, you'll notice that it doesn't give us an option to choose anything larger in terms of an output size. And so for the image size, it's a viewport size. It's not a large image that we're going to get. It'll still give us something. But if we do like the software, I think a commercial version is only a couple of $100s to buy. It's not bad considering that SketchUp is free. So that stays there. For the format, I typically change the format to a JPEG. And that means that it's going to export out a JPEG for me. It's just what I'm comfortable working with. You can do either of the other two files here as well. And then when it asks me the image save location, it's important to change this from the default setting, which is model, to custom. Okay, if you keep it there, the rendering stays with the model and it doesn't save anywhere that you can sort of re-access. It's difficult to locate. So I'm going to click on custom. And then I'm going to click on this location to find a spot that I want everything to save. So there's three little dots here. We're going to click on that. And I'm going to determine that I want all of my models to save to my desktop and click OK. If I had a folder set up, I would put them in a folder. But for now, I'm going to use the desktop. And then I'm going to say OK to that. Now, if I wanted to do some more setting changes, I certainly could over here. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But now we'll say OK. All right, now what we need to do is go to the plugins menu, go back to SU Podium V2 and choose the material properties option. This is where it gets fun and interesting. Now each material, if you want a really good rendering, should have some of these settings or properties set. And all we need to do, I'm just going to widen this window a little bit. There we go. We can see everything now. This is our eyedropper or our paint select, or it will basically bring up any material I click on. So we're going to start there. Click on the eyedropper and then click on any material. So I'm going to go for the curtains here. You can see that they appear. The word says blinds, Roman, red, etc. Now I have to determine whether it's going to be a transparent fabric, have a little bit of reflective value, that would be strange, or whether it's going to be more of a nubbly, kind of thicker, bumpy type fabric. And for mine, I'm going to add a bump depth. Now I find that for things that are really bumpy, like an old reclaimed stone wall, you can go up almost to 100. But things that are meant to look like they're like a fabric that's a little bit bumpy, I find 20 often gives it that bump depth. But for a lot of this, it's a little bit of sort of trial and error and putting in numbers that are different from the other numbers. So that's all I'm going to do there, and I'm going to hit apply. And I'm going to go back to my eyedropper. You often have to click on it twice. And I'm going to select this material right here. And it doesn't seem to, it says no material selected. So what that tells me is that's a default SketchUp material, and I will need to repaint that surface with something. And I think I'm going to pick on maybe one of the woods in here. Now if you hold down the Shift key prior to painting something, everything that's in that material which it will change. It's an awesome time saver. So I'm going to change the value of that. And I'm going to make the scale much smaller. Maybe I'll make the scale larger. Let's go there. Okay, now that I have that material there, I'm going to go back to my eyedropper and select it, and it will appear for me. Now I have to decide, do I want this wood to look really shiny and reflective, or do I want it to be a really rustic looking wood? So I'm going to make it reflective. And set it at about 20. And I think for this one, I'm going to put a bit of a blur on it and apply it. Let's do another one. I'm going to make this one reflective, I think, a little bit, and keep going. Now the next one I want to do, I think, is the glass here, because that's important that we have transparency. I want to make that a little more transparent. You can see through it a little more, but I want to add a little bit of a reflection on that glass as well, because we know the glass does reflect, and I want a refraction. So that's the way the light bounces back to me. And I'm going to give it a refraction that looks like glass. And you can see all of the different refraction options here. So if I had chrome or steel or ceramic, I could put a reflection value on it, but then add a refraction that is meant to look like a glass map or a ceramic map, and it would make it look much more accurate to the material. So don't forget about that. So I'm going to add glass to that. No bump, no light, apply. And you can see I can see through it a little bit more, and we'll have a cool effect there. Now here's what your job is. I'd like you all to put a mirror somewhere in the room. What will be a mirror? I'm going to just show you how to do that. I'm going to add one over here. And I'm going to push-pull it. And I'm going to add a new material to it. Maybe that's a color. And I'm going to do a color that I don't have anywhere else, maybe that one. And I'm going to paint it. Now, once I have that material on that surface, I'm going to select it, choose the material, and for this I'm going to give it a really high reflection value. Now, never go to 100, even if it's a mirror, because it doesn't look realistic. It's so crisp and clean. It's just almost like impossible for anything to be that reflective. So even a mirror should only be in the high 80s to low 90s, but I'm going to give it a value of 91 and apply. So let's go ahead and change all of the materials before we try to do a render. And I want you to change things in your model to look the way you want them to look, and I'm going to go ahead and do the same. Okay, I've gone ahead and changed some of my materials now, and I used a zebra wood from the Podium browser. I've changed this surface into a reflective mirror, added reflection to my glass. You'll notice I've changed the flooring, and it's basically concrete from the Podium browser, and I've added quite a large bump depth to that. And the final thing I've done is with the television, I've done something called giving it a light power. You'll notice in the material properties there is also an option there to give something a little bit of lighting. Now this could be that you actually draw a surface, a circular surface, and give it a color, give it a material, and then allow it to have some light power. So essentially with that you can make your own lights, and when you do that you'll see exactly that, a light sort of be emitted from that material. But I also add a little bit of a light power to things like televisions and computers, and they tend to look much more realistic then as they kind of have that light coming from behind them. So that would certainly be a way to create your own lights, by drawing a surface and giving it a light power. Now a really, really strong light power is somewhere between 10 and 15. You don't need to go too high here. In fact, I never use the high intensity, but you can, use a number like that. But for televisions and computer screens, I'm typically using in around a light power of 2. Okay, so once that's all complete, we're going to go to the next step. Now I do like to add lights from my Podium browser as well, and you'll notice that there are tons of lights in there. I'm going to do the free files again, and we're going to go to light fixtures. Now the nice thing about these light fixtures is that they already have all of the lighting properties set up, and they're quite well done, and so I'm going to go through and let you do the same. Choose maybe a floor lamp, maybe a table lamp, just to add a little bit of that effect and softness into your space. So go ahead and choose a few of those. Again, it's simply a matter of double clicking on the image that you like, and when you move over after you've double clicked, you'll notice that it comes in like a component or a block into your drawing, and you simply have to place it. Now I'm going to make a copy of this light, and how I'm going to do that is go to Copy, and then I'm going to use what's called Paste in Place. And that puts a copy right on top of my original, and then I can go to the Move command and very easily move on the red axis the distance that I want from the original. Now what I like to do is hold down the Shift key, select both of them, go to Copy or Control C, go to Paste in Place, and now use the Move command, and now I have 4. It becomes quite exponential. That process is going to keep going for me, holding down the Shift key, Control C for copy, and paste in place. And I'm just going to do these last 2 and paste in place. Lots of lighting there. Might be too much, but we'll see. So now that we've gone ahead and changed our reflective and bump and light power for our materials, and we've added some additional lighting, we're going to try and see what a render will look like. Now there is additional things that we can do to be aware of, and it's in the light system, but we'll follow up with that after we see what it looks like initially. Because we know that there are electrical fixtures that we can put in that give a strong light, but there are also some omni lights and various other types of lights that we can add, and we have to see first of all if our rendering ends up being too light or too dark. Now to render this image, what I've started out by doing is to use my field of view option, just stretch it, because I want to seem like I'm right in the space here. I don't want to see any SketchUp edges. I want it to be like as realistic as possible. So get the view that you think looks the best for you. I'm going to just orbit a bit more, but I definitely have stretched it here. And then you want to go to Plugins, SU Podium V2, and you're going to select Render. The shortcut for that is this little icon right there. We're going to click render. Now it will tell us that we still have a certain number of days left on this, and that's why I encouraged you on the first lesson to actually wait until about Module 4 or 5 before we download Podium, so we can go ahead and close that. And what you'll see is an icon at the bottom of your screen it's showing that it's rendering the image. Now it goes through this process. What I like to do is click on the rendering, click on show, and so I can watch it as it's rendering the image. It's quite fun. You'll see how it goes through all of the edges, it'll analyze all of the surfaces, and it will do a pre-rendering take on it. It will go into a ray tracing, and then it will find all your edges, and it will take several steps. Now what's going to happen when this is complete is it will automatically save a copy to your desktop if that's how you set it up the way that I did. Mine is set up to save automatically to my desktop. The image will go there, so I don't need to do an additional save. But you will see how this window is a separate export of our SketchUp file.
A new Podium light system has been released with issue Podium version 2.5. This includes a vastly improved spotlight feature, as well as an alternative method of inserting Omni lights. The light system has an easy-to-use inferencing and snap method of inserting lights. To access, pick Podium Light System panel icon from the toolbar. Pick Spot to create a spotlight. Pick Omni to create an Omni light. The Create button will start the placement process. There are several things to consider before creating a light. The light power ranges from 1 to 100. There is a color picker which allows you to apply various colors. A spotlight emits a cone-shaped light face on the face you select. The inner cone controls the diameter of the spotlight, while the outer cone is the diameter of the spotlight's soft shadow area. Once you have made selections, click on Create. First click will place a red square on an entity in your model. This is the first inference point. Move the crosshair along one of the axis lines. The Shift key will snap the crosshair to an axis line. Your second click will be the center of the light source. Finally, drag the beam angle line to a location on a face and click. You can edit lights after they have been inserted. Just select the light group and open the Podium Light System user interface. You can also use SketchUp's outliner to select the spotlight. The spotlight will be listed as Light Spot Group. Let's render this model. And here is the final image.